Alright guys, shout out to Stace who wanted me to review or analyse a Magnetude track. I chose this one because I've played it out before and I really like it. So it's that classic 21 Pilots Heathens tune, which I actually never even heard before I heard the D&B remixes of it. So it was the audio did one first, I think, and that was the one I used to play a lot. But then this one like kind of topped it a bit, in my opinion. In terms of the like chaotic production, anyway, the audio one is still a banger as well. Those kind of like sweeping pads in the background, there's kind of like two, but one of them, it has like a really sharp sort of ringing sound to it, and yeah, that's definitely building a lot of tension there. I already love those drums, the way they come in, like they sound like they just sound like pleasant to the ear, like from the off, like even though they're not at full capacity yet, just that break is just like really, really nice and clean. It's quite a simple kick pattern on the break, but it's like the shuffle hits in between the kick and snare that make that break so good, like the classic D&B stuff, obviously, but those specific sound of those shuffles in that break are what make them so nice from my perspective. So that drop kind of came out of nowhere, so it's like a surprise drop, which is great because it's almost Christmas. Actually, it's not. It's Halloween today. That like dum dum before, it kind of reminds me of like a shotgun or something like that. It's like that was your build up, basically, just that off we go. So the structure of this composition is set up in like a really obvious like 2-bar to 2-bar like call and response. So it's like, it's literally call, response, call. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of style of tune, which is wicked. So like obviously the first call is like a sort of slower, sort of sucking you in, and then the response is like full on, like a lot faster, like basses and faster drum fills as well. There's like there's space between the drums in the call section where there's just a few little fills, but then when you get to like into the response part, like the fills are just like going all over the place with like the bass hits as well. So that contrast between the like speed as well, not just the melody as well, is going up at the beginning, and then it goes like more straight in the response section, but also the speed of it is contrasted, so you've got this really like separated A-B like part of like a 4-bar loop, basically. And then yeah, you've got those really nice little trills that come in like at the end of the response section, like the second section. On the first few times there was like a little kind of sweeping reverse, which goes back into that main synth that's on the call again. But then when you got to that end part, the end of that like phrase, you had like a special trill which had like a nice melody to it as well. And it actually goes on for longer, like past the downbeat on the next like 1. So essentially that creates a bit of space, and it also like messes with your head a bit, but you know, you catch up again, because as soon as the snare comes back on after that happens, you've had a little glitch almost, but then you've caught back onto the beat again. So it's quite a cool little mind trick, you know. Again, like there, you have those parts where on the actual kick, like where you would expect to be the downbeat, like everything's like cut away. And yeah, that's something I quite like to do as well sometimes in my productions, because it just like as soon as you start falling asleep, you wake up again, because it's like it's changing the groove essentially. Like it's kind of messing with your head in a way. And yeah, essentially in those parts, it's like a kind of reverbed out version of the lead, kind of like sucking back in, like a kind of reversed kind of sound, which is cool, because essentially you're using elements from the main kind of driving part of the song, but resampling them and reversing them and affecting them in such a way that it's like a separate kind of sound, but made from one of the original sounds, so it all ties in together, you know. This bit's quite spectacular, because it's such a like overly produced track. Like this is what I would define as like maximal production. Like everything's been pushed up as much as it can go. There's no real gaps in the frequency spectrum, so when you do have those little gaps where there's silence, like it draws your attention to it even more, because the whole track already is mixed down to such a high level, and like there's already so much going on, so those contrasts are like even more prominent. But so what is quite impressive is how the vocal is mixed into this, because you've got all this going on. You've got all these mid basses that are taking up the same range as the vocal, and then when the vocal comes in, you still have all those mid basses going on. So to get that mix sounding good, like they have done here, is quite a feat, if you ask me. So essentially what you have here, when the vocal's playing, is like the mid basses kind of take a bit of a backseat and wrap around it a little bit. That's what I hear. And then as the vocal like kind of stops that little section, then the mid basses come back in again, and then they take like the center stage basically, because there's, you know, essentially one thing has to sort of be taking the center spot at any given time that you're like focusing primarily on. And so it's like a dance between the mid basses and the vocals, like during that section there. Kind of like a switch up of the snare, which keeps things interesting. It's great that this is like a free download as well. Like it's a bootleg, right? You know, they've just done it for free, so they can't make money from it, obviously, but you can get a hell of a lot of exposure from it, which is sometimes worth more than money these days. So what I can hear in the breakdown is kind of like, I think it's 3 or 4 main elements. maybe 5. So you've got the piano, which is the main sort of driving force of the breakdown. Obviously there's a layer of white noise sweeping over the top of it. Then you've also got the atmosphere in the background, which is like it's kind of a pad almost, but it has a melody to it as well. It's like copying the piano almost. And then you have these like little parts I mentioned earlier where it's kind of quite sharp. Those kind of like sharp effect pads, I guess, or risers. And then here you hear the reversed reverb of the vocal as well, like a choir kind of sound, you know. So that's essentially what makes up that breakdown intro section. And a lot of the tunes that I listen to when I do feedback sessions, for example, a lot of their intros seem quite sparse and uninteresting, you know. And even though like essentially it's like there's not really much going on, it's a breakdown section, there is still a lot going on. There's still like 5 like instruments essentially playing together at the same time. They're just like very quiet and, you know, mixed in well together, but there's still that layer of like complexity to it. And yeah, like often when I hear intros, I'm like, you haven't used anywhere near enough elements like in your actual intro. Obviously this is a new section as well. We've got like a halftime drum bit coming in, which is cool. One thing about Magnitude is like their mix downs are like absolutely on point, and they're like, they are that kind of how I refer to as like maximalist kind of sound, you know. You have a kind of like some Foley sounds coming in that are kind of in a rhythm. It kind of sounds like these little sort of click sweep kind of natural recorded sounds that have a bit of a rhythm to them as well. So that again, that's another layer. I feel like we're going to get a surprise drop again. Obviously they're nice to have a little switch up instead of the little we had a little bit of a kind of glitchy sound effect. And then on this part they go full in with the bass but like leave the drums, you know. Again, it's all variations at this point, you know. It's a 5-minute and 30-second long track. It's really high intensity and high energy, and if you don't get all these little different variations in throughout the course of the whole track, like it's gonna get tiring to the ears. And so that's something else they've done really well. And you know, for this kind of intensity of like neurofunk drum and bass music, like you need to have all those variations that happen throughout the course of the song, because otherwise it will just get stale. The drums are absolutely incredible as well on this song, I must say, because all the transient hits and all the sounds of them, they're all coming through so punchy and clear, and the shuffles as well, they all have like a lot of attack, and they still have a bit of punch in them as well. And the way that although they have that low kind of punch, like they're obviously going to be fighting with the mid-range of the bass quite a lot, and so to mix them in around that takes a lot of skill, and they've obviously smashed it with this. So that's really cool as well, that when you had those little leads that fill in those little gaps with the little melody when it went up and then up and then down again, I think. So it kind of started up and then went down, but on those three, like the first two, they're quite sort of in your face and dry, and then the third one, they've intentionally made it sort of a quieter like version, which is sort of like more of just the reverb or the room sound of that lead rather than the actual dry, aggressive element of part of the lead. And so essentially that is wicked because they're just messing with you. It's like you thought the third one was going to be like the same as the first two, but then the third one's like a bit quieter and more in the background, and then it just adds more levels of dynamics to the overall song. Also, I love that after the vocal cuts out, then the mid bass comes back in. The actual like groove on it at the beginning, that that's really, really such a nice little moment of funky bliss. You know? That part is wicked. That's what makes it neurofunk, that one. Because like, without being disrespectful, like so much neurofunk that I hear is just like full on in your face straight beat, you know, and if it hasn't got that like real not authentic, but that real like obvious like offbeat funk groove, then yeah, come in. Then I kind of feel like it's just missing the actual part that makes it neurofunk in a way, because there's no funk to it. You like it? Come in, man, and say hello. I'm just filming a YouTube video.
Okay. For a second I was like, that's my goddamn mic. Oh well, never mind. I'm glad you're using it. I need to learn to share. My friend. Use my friend. I must learn to share.
Yeah, so essentially that last section was kind of the same, but they just have like a different snare in it again. So I mean, by this point at 5 minutes, there's not much more you can change, you know, without starting in the next song. Most important part, the outro. How much love do you put into your music? You know, how much care do you put into it? That can be determined by how much time you put into your outro. Oh, I like that ending. That cuts off really cool there. Wicked. Excellent stuff. Yeah, let me know in the comments what song you want me to analyse next. And yeah, again, obviously these are just my opinions. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily an expert. This is just my opinions on my channel. So I hope you like it.